Here's Max Hilligoss, and Max said he is 98 years old and he's been farming most of his life. So we're going to let him give us a little history of his life and where he lived and when he moved to Whitley County. So Max, we'll leave it up to you, and you can take it over from here.
Okay. Well, I was born in 1917 in Clear Creek Township. My dad was born in Rush County. My mom was born in Shelby County. My grandpa was born in Rush County. My grandpa bought his farm in 1915, and my dad moved up the year I was born from Rush County in 1917. We lived there a couple years and we moved. I can't just tell you the exact place, but we moved about 3 times, and then we wound up in Bicentennial. Well, I've already told you that. So then I played basketball all my 4 years in high school, and baseball was my big thing. I could hit the ball. I married my wife in 1937. I was 20 years old. I had worked in the summer. Well, I need to tell you ahead of time. My dad was broke. He didn't have any money. He finally, when I was 14, he finally got a job in Huntington at the ASC committee. And at 14, I planted all the corn when I was 14 and 15. He would help me in the morning, and in the evening, we did that all with horses. Mules was our long suit because they could stand the heat better and they walked faster. I could check 27 acres. We had 27-acre fields, and I could check that in a day. And then we couldn't work the horses all night, so we quit about 5:30 with the horses. We ate supper. Then my dad, we had an old Fordson tractor at that time. My dad took that Fordson tractor after we ate supper. He worked another field for. How he did that, I can't tell you, because it didn't have no lights on it. He didn't miss anything, and he had another field ready for me to work and plant the next day. We checked, you know what checking corn is. We checked all the corn so we could plow it crossways and lengthways. The yield.
Tell us how you checked corn. People probably don't know how you did that. Tell us how
We had a wire with buttons on. So we planted 37-inch rows. The buttons were 36 inches apart on this wire. You had to unroll the wire along the side of the field before you started. You had a stake set at each end. When you went across the field, that check wire was over here and you was planting here, and it came through a fork on the corn planter. When it came to the button, it tripped it. We had plates to plant, 2 in one hill and 3 on the other side in another hill. When you went the distance of the next wire, that would come through this fork on the planter and trip the planter, and that would drop the corn in the ground. And that's the way we checked. And then when you got to the end of the field, you had to get off the planter after you turned the team around and put them on the guide mark. You got off, went over here, picked up your stake with the wire on, went over right straight behind the center of the planter. The trick was you didn't pull the wire, you just went over there and set the stake, went around the side, put the wire in the fork, and this folded up. Well, that made this. Then as you drove across the field again, when that button came in that fork, it tripped the planter and dropped the corn in the ground. That was the corn planting. And
tell us the advantage of checking corn, how you could, when you cultivated, how many different angles could you cultivate that corn?
just crossways. We plowed it crossways the first time. Then we planted it lengthwise when it got about knee high. The first time we planted it, it was only about 6 inches high. Then we waited till maybe the weeds had maybe kind of trinkle a little, then we'd plow it lengthwise, and then we laid it by. That's the last time we did it. And then when the corn, we cut a little bit for the cattle with the shocks, not too much, but then we shucked all that corn. At that time, we had about 65 acres of corn down on State Road 5 on the Miller Farm. There was 240 acres down there. I had a hired hand. When I moved there on Guy Miller's farm, I'd helped him on weekends and stuff, and he treated me real good. When I got married when I was 20, and we moved over there. We had all the essentials in the house at that time, and we planted all the corn, and then we planted the oats. Maybe we planted the oats first. And we already had wheat planted the fall before. And we shucked all that corn. I started out on the fourth. He furnished everything, and I got a fourth. We had stanchions in the barn to handle 40 head of steers. That was probably the smartest thing I ever done. People think starting on the fourth. He owned the horses at that time. We had an old regular farm all that he owned, and he brought that over for me we plowed with that after I'd left my home farm. We plowed with that regular farm all with the hired hand did. I worked the ground, most of it with the horses. I'd harrow it, and while he was plowing, it dried a little, and I worked the ground. Then we planted it. And
so tell us how when you moved.
Well, when I moved away from Huntington County, it was in 1947. I moved to Whitley County, right over by the Catholic Church off of State Road 9. We had been able to buy a tractor, a 41M, at a sale that a farmer was quit farming in 1944. And I had that tractor when I moved to Whitley County. And that's the only tractor. There was 160 acres there. And I farmed that till 1950, and they sold it, and I couldn't buy it. But another fellow bought it, and he rented it to me for another couple years, and he died. Then they wanted to sell the farm, I bought a 50 acres right across the road for $14,000. And there was 12 heirs to that, and I didn't have to pay for that till they got all the kids to sign off. I had raised a crop. I had enough money when we went to sign that to pay for that 50 acres. It had some trees on it. It had some water ponds. I had a neighbor that was really better at that than my dad. We ditched that, tore all the woods out in the back end. We now have a 50 acres over there that's clear and ditched. It's probably the best ground we got. My dad did not want me to buy that farm that was way back off the road. It wasn't quite a half a mile, but it was back by Jake Sheets. And he didn't, we lived there all the time. I had 3 girls that were born down in Huntington County, about 3 years apart. The first girl was born after we was married in 3 years, and then we waited 3 years until we had them broke. Then when we moved to Whitley, I wanted a boy. So I was 37 years old when John was born. And that's the best thing that ever happened. I started John out like my dad started me out, and we have worked together. He's 62 years old, and we have worked together all these years. We get along great. We don't argue. When my wife was living, we didn't take our troubles to the house, to his wife or my wife. We settled it out at the hog house. When we left the hog house, we agreed on what we was going to do. And we still farm together.
So how many acres do you farm now?
Well, we did farm the Miller place, all of his ground again in the 80s. And that all amounted, there was 240 acres where I lived. I didn't move down there now. I just rented that for $40 an acre. There was 240, it wasn't all farmland, there's a wood, 240 acres there, 160 where he lived, and he owned an 80 right south of where he lived. We farmed all that with what we owned where I live now, the second time. So he was happy with my farming, or he wouldn't done it the second time, you know. And do you want to know what we give for the farm? My grandpa moved where I now live in 1915. He gave $8,000 an acre. No, $8,000 for the farm. Then in 1936, my dad bought the farm for $5,000.
How many acres was that?
80.
80 acres.
80 acres. In 1968, I bought it from my dad for $44,000. I had to pay $10,000 down, $1,000 a year plus the interest. That's the way I bought the farm. Well, my dad died, and I had a brother and a sister, and I had to pay them off. You know, they wanted their money. I had enough money at that time to pay them off. And then I still owed the money. But I done something that nobody else probably ever done. I bought a lot of international equipment. Instead of going to the bank, it was hard to borrow money at the bank when you didn't have any. That's the reason I turned out to be an international man. I went to Hilligoss, and they loaned me enough money to pay my sister and my brother off. I signed a note when I had $100 to pay. I went down to Hilligoss. They only charged me 2% interest, and I paid that. Next time I sold hogs, what I could spare, I went down and paid them. And that's what happened when I bought any tools. I bought it there. I didn't have to have my wife sign a note. I could walk in there and buy what I wanted to buy. I didn't have the money to pay for it at the time, maybe the down payment. They just put it in the safe. And if there was a due date, if I didn't have the money at the due date, I went down there and told them. They said, well, that's okay, but don't forget when you sell your hogs to forget us, you know. And that all worked out great. When we moved in Huntington County, we had no telephone, we had no lights, we had no toilet in the house, we had no water in the house. We took a bath 2 times a week in a wash tub. I had a brother and a sister. My sister got in the tub first. My brother got in there second. We added some warm water to it. It's hard to believe that I took a bath in the same water that they did. But we heated the water in the cook stove in the reservoir. You know what that is? In the reservoir. That's the way we heated the water. And that's the reason we didn't dump the tub, because the reservoir didn't hold that much water, but I could add enough water to make the water warm in there by adding it out of the reservoir. And in 1936, they got electricity. We didn't have a telephone. We walked over to Ralph Clark's. Dad did if he had to use a telephone, and used their telephone. And times were tough. Mom would get a bunch of little baby chicks, and then I don't know how long it took till they got big enough to fry, but she'd take a bucket of scalding water out and catch a rooster with a stick about that long, a little hook on the end. She'd scald that. She'd pick the feathers off of that. The feathers would just about fall off of that. We had chicken for dinner and chicken for supper. I got so tired of chicken, I can't hardly stand to eat chicken. So that's the story of that. We did have a gas engine and a pump jack, and we had to walk outside the house when I was still going to school and run that gas engine. We could pump it by hand too, but if we wanted to water the stalk, there was a pipe down to the tank and one in the straw shed, and we'd start that gas engine, and it had a pump jack on that pumped it up and down, and that's the way we had water to the horses and the cattle in the cattle shed before we had water in the house. Well, they never, when Dad moved away from there, I didn't want to go along. He moved to Rowan, the Jews elevator in Southwood. I don't know if you ever heard about the Jews, and they owned a lot, and they rented him 240 acres in Rowan. It was all sandy. And he raised, and I decided I didn't want to go there because my girlfriend lived here. So I got a job out by Servia for $1 a day and my board and room. He had no tractor. It was 160 acres. I helped him in. I hitched my 3 horses up to a walking plow, tied him to the fence, helped him hitch 5 to a gang plow, which was a 2-bottom, and helped him get turned around to get to the field. Then I went and got my team, 3 horses and the walking plow. And you can understand how tough you got when you had to plow half of that with the horses. And we made hay with the horses and the hay loader, and I loaded the hay and he mowed it. He didn't take advantage of me. He did his share, you know. And if we hauled manure, he helped load. And then I took the spreader out with the team and unloaded it while he done something else. When I got back, he was there, and we had a big straw shed. When we got up in the morning, we got up at 5 o'clock. His wife and him, Virgil Little was his name, and his wife went to the barn. When I went to the barn, I took care of all the horses and the hogs. Him and his wife milked the cows. I never had to milk while I worked for him, which was a blessing, you know. I didn't have to work on Sunday, so I had nobody worked on Sunday then. Now everybody does. But nobody, you know, they'd go out and fix their harness or fix some tool or something like that where nobody'd see them, you know. But they didn't work in it. Nobody worked out in the field. And that kind of gave the horses a rest over the weekend too. That was part of the items. Then I left there, and me and a buddy that I learned to know over there went to his uncle's to Illinois. They'd had a lot of rain. They had no corn shucked. We went out there for 2 weeks and shucked corn, and we made $10 a day, and we couldn't hardly carry the money home. And we was really, really happy with that. And that was in I got married in 1937. And that was in 1936. 1937, at 20 years old, I got married. Well, I've told you the part about the miller. We moved right away. We got married on Saturday night, or Saturday noon, and then we had a square dance Saturday night to celebrate. Then we moved on Monday. That's after we got married. We moved on Monday. We had our first girl after 3 years. She is 76 years old now. We had the second girl 3 years later. By the way, she passed away about 8 years ago. She had a disease that they couldn't cure. 3 years later, we had another girl. She's just 30 years younger than me. She's 68 years old. Then that all happened. They were born at home. If you never went through that, that's an experience you can't believe. Then we moved to Whitley County, and I wanted a boy. So I was 37 years old, and we give it a try, and we got a boy. And that's John. So that's the life of the family.
So did you have, when you first were married, did you have electricity? Do you remember when you first got electricity?
We in 1936, first year I got out of school, we got it either in 36 or 37. I helped my uncle haul the poles along 114 there. We'd go down to Huntington and get them off the railroad. Them poles were all marked. The hole where they went was all marked. Why that happened, I don't know. But we had to put the hole, you know, the one that was marked, we had to put in the hole where it was marked. Yeah. And soon after, I'd say in 38, and my grandpa where I live now, I can remember a guy, he had a wire in that house. But when they turned the juice on, I don't know exactly. It was in 38. It was 1938.
So how did that farm?
Well, you know, we had gas lights, and I don't know how the electricity changed our farming, because we'd done it with the horses and that Fordson tractor, you know, and we still done it the same way. But it was easier to get around, you know. We had a gas light that you pumped up, had mantles on it, and you know it made a nice light. We had a hard coal burner in the house. We didn't have no furnaces. We had a hard coal burner in the house, and when it got down to zero outside, we all sat around there. We had a radio with batteries that we'd listen to Amos and Andy and that kind of thing in the evening, and about 9 o'clock, Dad would say, well, you got a big day tomorrow, it's time for you to go to bed. So it's hard for me to sleep up past 9:30. I got in that habit, you know, and I'm ready to go to bed.
So you remember when you got your first indoor plumbing, your bathroom? How did that change things?
That was in the 50s. And I didn't own that place over by church. Bob Mayer owned it. I dug the place for the septic tank, and I had to dig the drain out quite a ways for the drain out of there. And we put that all in. And that had to be in the 50s. I don't know exactly what year it was, but Bob Mayer owned the farm, and we rented it. We went out to an outside shack and done our thing. I didn't very often use it. I had a way down at the barn. And my girls, I talked to them about this, and they trained themselves to wait till they got to school. So they didn't have to go out to that outside shanty when it was zero. They would, I got my first car in 1935, a Chevy Coupe. And I had that Chevy Coupe and raised them 3 girls on there.
How much is that Chevy Coupe? How much did it cost you?
$35. My dad, that was when I got out of high school in 1936. Dad paid $5 down on it and looked at me and said, if you don't pay the rest of it, they'll take it away from you. If you wreck it, you won't have anything to drive. I can remember him telling me that as it was yesterday. And I finished paying for that car by working for $1 a day. We got out of school in April, you know, so that made it possible for us to do the farming. For me to do the farming, now it wouldn't work because they don't get out till June, you know. The thing we done and I done for my dad couldn't be done now because we just don't get out of school. And it seemed like we got home and sometimes I went over to the neighbors and shucked 2 rows of corn through the field before dark. Now, you know, 5:30 it's getting, well, of course it stayed light longer back in the fall than it does now. But I did that to get an extra buck. And my wife didn't work until the boy was born. And she waited till she got him broke, and then she didn't want to sit in the house all along, and she got a job. There's 3 or 4 women up there within a mile. They got a job at Huntington at the Bluebell. Yeah. Oh, I forgot one thing. In 1937, when Dad moved to Rowan, I got a job at the overhaul factory at Columbia City. And I rode with a neighbor up there to work. I didn't drive, I rode up there. And they put me on a hemming machine to hem the bottom of the overhauls. And I'd worked up there about a week. And for me, I was never happy because I had always farmed. I wasn't really happy. The boss came over there and he said, you're going to have to get better. We're going to have to give you another job. You got 2 repairs here since you've been here. 2 pairs of overalls. I looked up at him and I said, I'll tell you what you do. You have my check ready at noon. When I walk out, I want it. He says, well, we can't pay you till the end of the month. I said, you have my check ready. When I walk out of here, I'm going to stand out there and wait till I get it. And I got it. I hitchhiked home, and I got in my car. I stayed in it. Well, now it'd be my brother-in-law's. I got in my car. I drove down to Miller's, and I had a job that night. So, but it was farming again. So that was my thing.
Well, that was Bluebell here in Columbia City, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we had 4 teams of mules, or 3 teams of mules. We had 6 mules. They were tough. We didn't plow with that Fortune tractor. We done the plowing with the mules. We had 3 on a gang plow and 2 on a walking plow, and Dad let me drive the one of the riding plow because I wasn't too damn old then, you know. And we did that until I got out of high school in 1935. I got out of high school in 1935. And and then that's when I moved, and I stayed with my grandpa up there when Dad moved to Rowan. I stayed with him. We both slept in the same bed. He had a bed that would roll up against the wall, and it was only that wide when we got in there. And when I did the farming up there, we put the mules in the barn there and fed them. It was a half a mile from where we lived. We didn't have to run them that half mile back every night and morning. He'd get up in the morning, go feed the mules and harness them, come back and get breakfast and come in and wake me up, and we'd eat breakfast together, and then I'd go out and farm. In Whitley County, you could haul your tax out, and I hauled all Grandpa's tax out with them mules, and they could walk 4 miles an hour. There wasn't a team in a whole bunch. We had guys to help load. It only took 15 or 20 minutes to load the little gravel board, Sometimes we'd haul that load 5 or 6 miles. Sometimes it'd be 6 or 7 miles. We had regular gravel beds. They'd unload it first, and we'd go back and get another load. And they always had about 3 or 4 guys in the bank up at the gravel pit would help load the load, and it didn't take very long, But they didn't do that in Huntington County. Whitley County, you could haul your tax out, and that was in 1936.
So tell us, how many years have you planted corn? I heard you tell somebody the other day, how many years, you're planning on planting again this year, how many years have you planted corn?
Well, I started planting corn when I was 14, and I quit about 2 years ago. I still, up until that time, John said, you want to keep that in there, and I always planted a field up until the last 2 years. And he wanted me to keep that string going, So the straight fields over there on this 50 acres that I told you I bought over there by church, that was straight through 50 acres, and it wasn't that hard to do just 2 years ago. We had an 8-row planter.
So you started 1930, right? It was about 1930 when you planted your first corn? Was it about 1930 while you were 14 or 15?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you planted up until, until 2014, so that's quite a few years.
We switched over in the later, I'd say, in the last 10 years. We'd switch over. John would work over on the other side of the field with the tractor, and I'd plant, and we'd switch over if we had to. After we started using fertilizer, we'd be enough ahead. Then I'd run to South Whitley after we got the 8-row, I went after the fertilizer, all of it, and we got a 1,000-gallon tank that we pulled behind the pickup, and now, the thing I see, they've never lowered the price of things. Fertilizer, I paid that the other day, and the seed corn bills came yesterday, and it's laying on there. They never changed the price of it. If anything, it's up about $5 a bag. Corn is half the price it was then. Beans are close to, they're $8 and something. They used to be 17. And the same way with corn was $7.25. Now it's $3 and, well, we sold some the first of the month. John sold 2,000 bushel and I got that hauled and we got $3.93 for that. It's went down ever since. It's only about $3.68 now. So you got to be careful. There's not going to be much money made farming. You're going to have to watch your P's and Q's, and you're not just like a tractor. They got them up to $250,000. I give $50,000 for the tractor that I got. That's most. So see how the difference has changed, and the price is lowered. You're going to have to tighten up and survive this thing till things get better. The magazines say it's going to be 1917 before things look much better. Now they don't know any more about it than we do, but that's what the farm experts are saying.
Well, looking back, what do you say be the best years of your life? If you'd go back, and which time segment there would you consider the best and happiest times in your life?
Well, I guess the best time is when I got married in 1937 and raising the 3 kids. My wife never wanted another one until we got the girls broke, and we planned that all out so she didn't have 2 wiping diapers, and doing that kind of thing, and then John was born. I was 37 years old, and the oldest girl was old enough, and we lived in Whitley County when he was born. The other ones was born in Huntington County, the first farm I farmed. The girls were all born at home. John was born in Columbus City, and the oldest girl could take care of him. I can remember seeing him sitting in the corner, to do his thing, so she didn't have to clean him up and wear a diaper. And she got him broke pretty quick.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us, Max, before we close our interview? Anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, there ain't many boys that farmed when they was 14 years old. My dad seen that I got to basketball practice. I played all 4 years on the first team. I played all 4 years on the baseball team. I was a catcher. I played till I was 50 years old, softball, only because I could hit the ball. And I was a catcher. I never hit a home run in my life, but I hit a lot of line drives, and I helped them score a lot of points. That sounds like I'm bragging, but I could hit the ball. I can't remember when I struck out. And now there's more guys strike out and hits the ball, and it should have got better. And basketball was the same way. When I played, we used to have a 4-way tourney with Clear Creek and Chester Township and South Whitley. There's 4 of us. We won it every year that I was in high school. So we had a good coach. and we knowed what to do.
Well, thank you, Max. I appreciate you taking the time today to come up and give us some of your life history, a lot of interesting facts here, and so we thank you. And
Well, I might have got mixed up a little bit, but
well, that's all right. You gave us a lot of information, so we appreciate it very
yeah.
much.